Welcome to Spicer and Company. I'm David Brody, filling in for Sean Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Well, David, some big news out of the Supreme Court regarding President Trump's tax records today. The High Court declared to clear the way for the prosecutors in New York to see the president's financial records. But there's more to the story.
Yeah, there always is more to the story. That's right, Lindsay. On its face, there was the 7-2 court decision that came out against the president. But, and it's a big but, it probably will be weeks before the court actually issues a formal judgment that would trigger the turnover of those records. So look, as much as Democrats had hoped to throw a ticker tape parade down liberal Main Street today, it really became more like a slow walk with a few faint trumpets in the background, no pun intended, that played a couple of bad notes along the way. All right, to break these two cases down, let's bring in Harvard law professor and Newsmax analyst Alan Dershowitz, author of the book Guilt by Accusation, The Challenge of Proving Innocence in the Age of #MeToo, available on Amazon Kindle, by the way, for free. Alan, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You know, I predicted this decision. I said publicly that I thought it would come out this way, that the state would win, the district attorney would be able to get the material, but that Congress in the end would lose, that executive privilege would trump the claims of Congress. And that's what happened. But in more practical terms, this is a practical victory for Mr. Donald Trump, the candidate for re-election, because the information won't come out in time to impact the election. But it's a setback for the presidency of the United States, because it means that 1,000 local DAs around the country, all over the country, local DAs can begin to subpoena sitting presidents' documents while they're in the Oval Office in order to conduct investigations for when they leave the presidency. And this has significant implications for federalism and the separation of powers. So a victory for Mr. Trump, a defeat for the presidency and separation of power.
Alan, take us through a little bit through these cases. I mean, we don't want to go into the whole long Harvard law professor hour and a half dissertation, if you will. But look, in one of these cases, the court ruled that the Manhattan district attorney can get access to the tax records. But then in another case, that it was different. It was involving House Democrats. They were trying to get those records. And basically, the case was booted back to a lower court. So take us through these two cases. I mean, you're saying the ultimate headline here for the president is a good one, ultimately.
For this president, as he's running for office, it's a victory because none of this material will come out in time for the election. What the Supreme Court held is that the president is not above the law. We all knew that, but that he does have executive privilege that he can claim as to material that Congress overbroadly sought. So the Supreme Court held 7-2 that the request was overbroad. It has to go back to the district court. In the end, Congress will lose most of what they want. In the end, the district attorney in Manhattan will get most of what he wants, but it will take time. And then it's supposed to be secret because it's supposed to go in front of a grand jury, not a public disclosure, unless it results in an indictment. In that case, after the president leaves office, if it's still within the statute of limitations, he could theoretically be indicted, and then the information would become public.
All right, so this is what the president's take on this was today on Twitter. That's where he goes, Alan. You know that. I mean, we all know that. Here's what he said. The Supreme Court sends a case back to lower court. Arguments to continued. This is all a political prosecution. I won the Mueller witch hunt and others, and now I have to keep fighting in a politically corrupt New York. Not fair to this presidency or administration. Do you buy this idea of political prosecution, what he's talking about here, Alan?
Everything's politics, of course. There's no question.
Even on this court?
Well, no. I'm talking about the democratically elected district attorney of Manhattan, who's open for re-election. Obviously, it's a big feather in his cap to be able to get Trump. For the congressional Democrats, obviously, it's all about politics. No, I think the Supreme Court divided in a way that really vindicated Chief Justice Roberts, who has been trying to say this is not a political court. You have two of the justices who were appointed by President Trump who voted against him in the New York case. I'm sure he's disappointed in that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering also about Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. Here we go again. 7-2 decision. Were you surprised at all regarding Kavanaugh and Gorsuch siding with the majority in this case?
No, I actually was surprised by Alito not siding with the majority in this case. I had predicted that there would be, I had predicted the result, but I didn't predict the numbers. I thought it would be even more. I thought it would be an 8-1 decision, but it ended up being 7-2. But the important point is that the two Trump appointees essentially voted against him in the New York case, voted more or less for him with the rest of the majority in the congressional case. I think the outcomes were predictable to lawyers who don't let their ideology interfere with their analysis. I think any lawyer who analyzes the law would see that those two decisions were entirely predictable.
Alan, Jay Sekulow, as you might imagine, Trump's lawyer in this, coming out with a statement. Let's put that up. We are pleased, this is Jay talking, we're pleased that in the decisions issued today, the Supreme Court has temporarily blocked both Congress and New York prosecutors from obtaining the president's tax records. We will now proceed to raise additional constitutional and legal issues in the lower courts, kind of getting to what you said earlier, which is this is not going away anytime soon. I mean, this is going to be dragging out for a while. You know, Judge Alito in the dissent talked about that. Everybody's going to talk about Trump and the effect it's going to have on Trump. But Alito made specific reference to other presidents down the line, that was his biggest concern. Talk to me about that.
When I argued the case in front of the Senate, I never mentioned the name Trump. I talked about the presidency of the United States and how it would be negatively impacted if Congress were allowed to impeach for abuse of power. I think that's the way you have to look at it. I have to tell you, the president's so lucky to have Jay Sekulow as his lawyer. He argued one of these cases in front of the Supreme Court. He's a brilliant, brilliant lawyer, brilliant constitutional lawyer. And I think his analysis is right on. For me, it was an honor and a pleasure to work with him against the impeachment and removal of the president. A president should be removed only by the voters or by the 25th Amendment. But when you have Democrats in a partisan vote trying to remove a president for abuse of power, every president's been accused of abuse of power, it would have totally shifted the separation of powers and would have destroyed the constitutional power of the president. So I'm proud of the role I played in playing a small role in helping to prevent that. And I think this decision today, these decisions follow up on the impeachment. They're all about the separation of powers and preserving the Constitution. Yes, Mr. Donald Trump is the subject, but the real issue is the presidency and the separation of powers.
Alan Dershowitz, always a pleasure. I'm going to run out and get that book. It's free. Hey, if it's free, I'm getting it, Alan.
Please get it. Please get it. Everybody should read it. I appreciate that very much.
All right. Thanks again, Alan. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Up next, did the Obama administration spy on then presidential candidate Donald Trump and his campaign? Well, former acting director of national intelligence Rick Grenell is here to answer that question. Then the FBI says the Chinese Communist Party is the greatest long-term threat to our nation's economy. Former Democrat Senator Joe Lieberman here to talk U.S. foreign policy. And we're continuing our China conversation with State Department spokesman Morgan Ortagus on the U.S. plans to block Chinese-owned apps. In other words, is TikTok going to go bye-bye? And later, Republican Congressman Jim Banks here to talk about Trump's push to reopen schools in the fall. That's a thorny issue. Stick around.